One of the problems that I'm going to talk about in today's show is that I realized we limit when we invite a guest, we say, you have to give us no more than two or three impressive things about you. And then I realized when I look at John's resume, he's got two and three Wikipedia pages full of stuff that is impressive. For example, he has three honorary PhDs. That's just amazing. Fast Company calls him one of the masters of innovation. He's a TED speaker. He's a former president of RISD, also known as the Rhode Island School of Design. He's an American technologist and product experience leader with a passion for resilience and renewal, and is currently the vice president of design and artificial intelligence at Microsoft. John, what an amazing resume is that. But I want to start by talking to you about the fact that people say that your invention of the steam engine was one of the big inventions of our time. In your case, it was also steam. Tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, really glad to be on your show, Abhijit. I'm a big fan of your work. You are truly someone who can think visually and strategically. So the talent is my passion. So thank you for having me here. STEAM is a movement that has been attempted to get started in particularly the United States because STEM education is a very powerful idea, science, technology, engineering, and math. And that kind of excludes art and design. And so when I was president of Rhode Island School of Design, I spent 3 years in the U.S. Congress lobbying to add art to STEM, STEM to STEAM. And back in the day, people thought it was a bad idea. Some artists felt like, what does art have to do with STEM? Whereas many art school teachers were having a problem because their art schoolrooms were being converted to chemistry classrooms and art was leaving the curriculum. So STEM to STEAM put art back in the curriculum, build an economic case around it, and years later, it seems to be everywhere. Very weird.
And you're the one responsible for leading it, in that space. But it's amazing.
For a brief moment, I was doing that, but now there are many leaders, and they've all forgotten me, and that's the way it should be, I think.
I'm going to sort of take you back a couple of years, to your childhood and talk about what was it like? And were you always the person who could do coding and art? What kind of a kid were you? Talk to me about that.
Well, I'm lucky because I grew up in a household that had no formal education. My father dropped out of high school. My mother finished high school. The most of their life was spent as laborers. In that household, I learned what hard work is all about. Really growing up in a part of Seattle that's known as the International District, I never thought I could leave that place, but my parents believed that education could change things. And so I think about your career sort of mentality. The only careers we knew about were gardeners or restaurant owners. And if it wasn't for a customer of ours who came to our tofu store who worked at Boeing and he was an engineer and he had a nice car, I thought, oh, I should become an engineer so I can get a nice car.
What was the reaction of your parents when you said that this is what you wanted to be and leave the tofu factory?
Oh, well, my parents really didn't want me to work there, to grow up stuck there, because it's really hard work. You wake up at 1 a.m., you work to 6 p.m. at night. It's 6 days a week, often 7 days a week. It's almost as if my dad read the famous Andy Grove book, Only the Paranoid Survive. So we were working all the time. In the summers, because there was no school, I would work at the tofu store. And so I used to love going to school because it was so much easier than working at the tofu factory.
When you were in school trying to make up your mind about what kind of education you wanted, how did you go about doing that? Because at that point of time, people had very little exposure. I'm going to presume that about you, but maybe you had more exposure. But people generally had very few career choices. At least in India, it was limited to the usual things that you could be a doctor, you could be an engineer, you could be a chartered accountant, a lawyer, or you could work for the government. This is pretty much the gamut of opportunities that people would come up with. In your case, you kind of went into a really one of those alleys, which is so incredible. What is the decision-making process like?
If I really wind back to grade school, my teacher told my parents that I was good at art and math. And then my parents told their friends that I was good at math. They didn't say the art part. I'm sure that happened in your own lifetime, Abhijit, I believe. But, it was good at math. I was good at math. Good at art, no, good at math. And then the customer who was an engineer, It wasn't a fancy car, mind you. It was just a car that wasn't beat up. And so I was like, oh, wow, I can have a car that isn't beat up if I'm an engineer. I had no idea what it was. And I think it points to your point of how, if, as a child, if you aren't exposed to different disciplines, you don't even know they exist. So I was an engineer all the way through my master's studies. Like I was going to go PhD in device physics. And then I found this field called design that I never heard of. And I thought, wow, what is this field? How do I get involved? So I did that. I discovered the business world. I got my MBA. I went into the investing world because of it. I find that I like to do things that I don't know because kind of the theme of the careers book, learning is a good thing. I love to learn. And when you learn, you may find a new career because of it.
I read that Wired magazine, described you as John Maeda is to design, what Warren Buffett is to finance. That's an incredible comparison point. But you went into design when people didn't even know what can design really be a career, if that's what it was like. In my part of the world, it was certainly like that. I mean, what is design? I mean, yeah, you need to know how to paint and all that. I mean, that's fine, but nothing more serious than that. So I can totally relate if your parents said he's good in art and math. It's only the math part of it which is then focused because that's something which is desirable. Art, it's something you do on weekends, but nothing serious. What made you visualize that as a career? How did it even happen? Was it your choice? Did you meet people who inspired you? What was that?
I think that design as a career path was already somewhat limited because before the digital revolution, I think design had a kind of role in different products getting made or communications being made. But because the computer is essentially a 24/7 communicating machine, I think the desire for design gradually grew. And with the mobile revolution, where everybody's carrying a TV screen and basically shining it at their own face, this idea of the experience, if the user experience is not good when you're staring at the phone 20 times a day, you're not going to use it. So these systems are designed to be very pleasurable, very easy to understand. And that's what design is. Similar to furniture. Furniture in your house, if it's uncomfortable to sit in, you're not going to sit down. So design's always existed in the physical space. And the digital space is relatively new, and it's a career path that many have found.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes think that somebody must have had an uncomfortable chair that led them to design the standing desk. That's my big discovery today. I thought about it.
Absolutely. Said this. And that's design, right?
For all the listeners, feel free to ask John any of those questions and we'll try and get you the answers. But if you haven't read his design and tech reports, which you've been doing, I think since 2015, and I actually first became a fan of your work based on the work that you did in design and tech reports. So what is your method of looking at this huge field called design, finding the trends? What does that look like? How do you go about doing it?
First off, Abhijit, when you told me that you actually know about the design and tech reports, I felt very honored because I'm not sure who looks at them, especially anymore. So I was like, wow, it meant a lot to me. And I always wonder if I should keep making those, but till I eventually don't get invited back to South by Southwest, I'll stop then. But so far, it's going to be 10 years next year. The reason why I do that is because I like to learn and I like to share. And I'm not that good at social media, so I'm not constantly pouring things out. But once a year, I produce a packet of information to share with the world. And I'm glad that some people find value from it. It's an attempt to explain design and business and technology in this new AI era.
What has changed since you first started creating those famous reports, design and tech? And I remember the first year when I read it, I was completely blown away because I kind of thought that, wow, I mean, what a phenomenal way to explain this. And I remember doing a sketch note and putting it for all my readers, and they said, we need to read this. And so, yes, a lot of people find a lot of value. What to you constitutes a trend? A lot of people use that very loosely. This is a trend. What do you think of as a trend?
Well, first up, you know that when you share things online, you find people that don't like what you share. Maybe you've noticed that, Abhijit. So it's like, oh, you're wrong, John. You're wrong, Abhijit. Like, oh, I guess you're kind of right. Sometimes I get it wrong. I'm not right. When you identify trends, you're basically making a bet, and most bets fail, right? I think I've been lucky that, as you know, if you bet a lot, you're more likely to bet correctly, whether betting on system-based thinking or inclusive design or computational design moving to artificial intelligence or even remote work. I've been lucky to roughly be on trend. The challenge with AI today is that it seems like to be the number one and number two and number three and number four trend right now. So I guess right now I'm trying to understand how humans fit into the puzzle, because AI is not truly intelligent in this way people are talking about in the science fiction way. It's a different way to write computer programs, is how I feel. And how humans responsibly engineer those systems is really the most interesting design question today, and I think at least for a few years.
What is going to be the fundamental shift in the profession of design?
Oh my gosh, like when you gave me those three W's, not the World Wide Web, but work, worker, workplace, in this fabulous book of yours, mine was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, that made sense to me. And you said to me, all three are changing at the same time. You know, the problem with change, if it's single variable change, okay, double variable change, triple variable change, and all intertwined. Wow, what a change. And so I feel like AI, as you know it, is changing work and the worker and the workplace. So I can't think of a better time for people to dig in to ask the question, my career was X. What will my career be next? Why? How's it going to change? Work, worker, workplace. A lot, I imagine.
So if we were to talk about design principles for careers, what are some of the 2 or 3 things that you would advise people? You know, a lot of people in the audience are people who are getting started in their career, and there's an equal number of people who work in some field or the other for decades, literally. For both these, are there going to be different design principles you would use, or are they going to be common, you know, at 2 ends of the curve? How would you describe it?
Well, you've given me the perfect language, Abhijit, and I'm so glad your book is published. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Worker, workplace are the perfect career principles. First off, the kind of work we're doing, as we know, is moving from direct manipulation to conversational, prompt-based things, you know, even for images as well, circle this and do this, more gestural. So that work is changing. The worker and what title will that person be is obviously going to change somehow. It's going to be much more computationally grounded. It's going to require more AI. It's a mixture of developer and designer that's going to really stand out. I like that phrase, dev design. So I think of myself more of as a dev designer type person who can cross code, AI code, and actual design. And then workplace, how the workplace already changed heavily from remote work and now hybrid work. I can imagine that the way we get more creative gets harder because in a studio environment or a workplace environment where everyone's together, you can learn from each other kind of through osmosis. But online, the best we can do is emoji each other, which is kind of like the signal of we're there, but it's different from bumping into people. But I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I feel that way.
I tend to completely agree with you on this, that if you're looking at creative work, can you work like this, you know, online and bounce ideas? Possibly, yes. But the spontaneity of just bumping into somebody in the corridor and saying, hey, John, have you read this? You know, this is what I was thinking of. And you draw something and you kind of say, no, I mean, I saw this. You should look at this. That kind of cross-fertilization is harder because this is harder, planned and structured, I think.
Yeah, and it may not be better. I mean, it may be because I'm used to the horse and buggy, and the Gen Z is used to the car, this electric vehicle. I think that I'm always drawn to wanting to, I guess, remain relevant. I think that every time I settle into something and I realize maybe I might be good at it, I get nervous because it's that phrase by Ray Kroc, when you're green and you're growing like a green tomato, when you're ripe, you're ready to rot. Like a red tomato, it's going to just rot. A green tomato gets to be red. So when I feel like I'm a really bright red tomato, I get a bit nervous and I choose green.
What's your method for choosing green?
My mother is my, I'm lucky to have my mother. She's still alive. We were just in the hospital the other day. And so I was like, oh, maybe this is like last time, but she came out. So she escaped and not escaped that way. You know what I mean? Well, I would have tried to, but every time I'm down, she always tells me that she believes in me. You know, I believe in you, John. And, you know, my mom doesn't have any context for anything I'm going through, but she's always there in that way that only a parent, you know, a loving parent. Some of you don't have loving parents, so that's hard. So you've missed that. I don't I feel sorry for you not having that, but for those of us who have been privileged to have a parent who can share this very clear love and belief in you, it's always gotten me up off the floor and got me back moving.
If your mom were to ask you, John, what do you do? How do you describe that?
She just laughs. She has this beautiful Hawaiian style laugh. Whatever kind of thing. She would never give me a straight answer. John just does something, and I think that's fine. What I do, I think, is I like to live at the intersection of latest technology, latest business opportunity, and something about the creativity, the design, the art in it. And I like to live at that intersection.
You've written a bunch of books.
So have you. Like this book. Please check out Career 3.0. I love this book.
Thank you. You know, what I find fascinating about your book, some of them I will admit I don't totally understand. I don't. You know, you've written about design and leadership. That's been pretty interesting. Talk to me about that.
Well, I had the opportunity to lead a large nonprofit around school design. It changed my life. You know, if you look at my Wikipedia page, it's not all good things. Or if you look online about me, some people really dislike me. So just the fact that when you choose to lead, you need to know you're signing up for failure, for always letting a lot of people down, because the leader's job is to carry all the risk of the institution and to experience it firsthand. And I mean, no need to sympathize with them. They're compensated for that opportunity, that responsibility. But I ran Rhode Island School Design the very year I joined. It was the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009. I had to oversee the worst layoff in the history of the 130-year-old institution. I had the city come after me. I had all the faculty come after me. It was a complex scenario. What kept me going was the students were very supportive and the parents were very supportive of me because they felt that I was hired to make change happen on behalf of the school. Things went the right way. STEAM movement happened. We were number one, Business Insider, all good kind of stuff. But, you know, success has its consequences, as you know yourself.
What is the biggest consequence of success?
I think the biggest consequence is you either become overconfident because you think it's because of you. It's often just random things that help you. When you're leading at scale, it's a lot of luck, hard work and a lot of luck. Or the consequence can be it really changes how insecure you are, how your confidence lowers. Some people can turn that around, some people can't.
How do you deal with that? When your confidence is rock bottom, one of the things you said is that you have parents who give you unconditional love, and that helps. What else helps you out of that?
You know, crying helps because, you know, there's tear ducts in here. So it's not nothing wrong with crying. It's designed to cry. It's like your arm can move, your eyes will cry. So, you know, crying, you know, feeling the pain. I try not to like dump on other people, so bring them down with me. I think a lot of solitary crying, feeling that, you know, finding a way out. Exercise works sometimes. I choose to find the next challenge, to focus my energy on testing myself.
When you look at design in everyday living, I have to see this one little piece about John's home. He's got a clock, you know, like we all have clocks to read the time. John has got a mathematical clock, where if it is 1 o'clock, it'll say something like 2 into 12 minus 23. If you are not good at math, you'll be lost.
Good luck.
Where did you pick that? That was the one which really stayed with me. I think it's the most unusual thing about your home is that one, among many other things. You consider it to be the most unique art object in your home.
You know, I forgot about the clock, how much I love that clock. The clock is a math clock. So, and there's different levels, 1 through 6. It's addition, multiplication, division, subtraction. 6 turns on division. And I'll tell you, sometimes I'm like, what time is it? I look at my watch. I'm never going to think that. My favorite piece of art in my house is the forest in the backyard. It's able to see part of the green belt, the conservation land. I feel that's art that can't be constructed. Whenever we sit outside next to the forest, you and me, Abhijit, and that's the first time I ever was out there with a friend like you, and it meant a lot to me. I'm always going to think of that balcony in our conversation, and you're always welcome back, of course.
When you look at getting ideas in your day-to-day life, what is your method? Do you collect a lot of ideas? Do you let it or do you take 1 or 2 ideas, try to connect the dots, then go to the third, then go? What's your process like?
As someone who admires execution, I don't know how you produce what you produce. I find your productive output to be extraordinary. Like when you showed me your sketchbook, I was embarrassed because I was like, whoa, Abhijit, that brain is running. And I say that in all sincerity because I used to have more time to draw. And when you draw, you turn on a different part of your brain, I think. So, and I've been just writing a lot of code because on the dev designer side, I'm very dev right now. And writing code is different than visual information, but I'm very excited about GPT-4V, which has vision in it. I'm hoping now to still code a lot because I have to do a lot of that to stay fit. But I want to do more coding and images and more drawing. And I think doing so will help me sort of bring back some of the visual creativity I think I've lost. You're an inspiration.
Oh, please. The stuff that you code and draw and all, it's just incredible, some of the things that are fascinating. And where did you come up with those designs? And this is for my listeners that, you should actually look up simply some of the cover designs of the books that John has produced. They're incredible. You wrote the code to make that happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the 90s, it was very rare for people to be able to write code and design images. So a lot of the works that I'm known for in the design world is from that era. I designed like an Absolute Vodka ad with sort of many, many lines of graphics, designed things for New York Times Magazine, a lot of type. And I did things back when a certain way of drawing was difficult. But over time, computer tools got better. And really everything I did in the past, some kid can close their eyes and do what I did back then in a few seconds, especially with AI now. So I think I was just lucky to be at the right place, right time in that era.
When you look at, I remember seeing in your home that Absolute Vodka bottle, which is called Absolute Maeda. And well, was that a souvenir that you got, or was that something you
was that something I made for an ad and just kept it? It was a time where things like that were difficult because really in the early days of Photoshop, it was an image editing tool, but I was kind of a counterculture person in the 90s that was saying it's important to write computer programs, which made me very unpopular. But I think that now, especially with the web, it's much more common for people to write code, whether it's HTML or CSX. Even that is code, right? I think that's more common today. But back then, it wasn't as common.
When you look at creating teams, you worked at MIT, you worked at RISD, and that's, the School of Design kind of teams, versus teams, say, in a company like Microsoft, where you're doing some cutting edge work. What's the difference between those teams? Do they run differently? Do they work differently?
Having experience in academia, nonprofit versus corporate for-profit, I will say that all very similar. Going back to careers, everybody, generally speaking, wants to have the next level up in their life. They want to level up or they want to go lateral across and try something else. When I build teams, I love diversity because I like different viewpoints. And I think that opinion of how quality is built, that I strongly believe is more of a fact, is something that I've carried in every role I've had. And that can include different skill diversity, different socioeconomic diversity backgrounds, gender, cultural. I think that leads to innovations that come from the different perspectives. We're discovering in agents, like AI agents and multi-agent programming, the same thing holds. Different agents with different, basically, persona, they produce a better result together.
But it's also that much tougher to manage, when you look at all the research about leading diverse teams. Everybody says that, you must have diversity in your team, but it's that much harder to manage.
Yeah, well, I've noticed in a lot of these articles, and even like the HBR ones, the nice thing about HBR is they'll tell you one thing is good, and they'll tell you the same thing is bad. So depending upon your SEO, you'll get the article that you want to read. That's how the world works, right? The thing is that the diverse teams being better requires a leader, manager to be a good bridge leader. And that comes from them understanding the different crafts. And so I pride myself that I understand business people, I understand developer people, design people, product manager people. I can cover the gamut and really kind of appreciate their craft and what they bring to it. And I can help different people who are different crafts understand each other. I think that's something I do. And so the HBR articles don't talk about the importance of a bridge leader or for a leader to hire bridge people.
Is it reasonable to say that the leader must be going forward more and more? You will need leaders who can bridge multiple disciplines, multidisciplinary leadership. In some sense, it's almost like a leadership 3.0. You sort of bridge 3 or more ecosystems.
that's one of your principles in Careers 3.0. And I was like, some people can do that. Like if you're a really good violinist, keep playing the violin. Don't play the flute. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a hard thing to do. I think that it means that, if you lead a team and you're not a good bridge person, you've been in the same company, same role for your entire life. As long as you're self-aware that you need bridge people on your team, I think that's a Career 3.0 style approach. So maybe you aren't that bridge, but are you aware how good having bridges can be? That's good enough, I believe.
Does it mean that if somebody is not a bridge because they don't have multiple disciplinary backgrounds or they don't have the perspective of all of that, that they should move into leadership roles?
Oh, not at all. No, I think it's great to have leaders who are multidisciplinary, because if you had every leader in the whole company multidisciplinary, you would lose specialization. I mean, a good example would be myself in that I'm not good at anything individually, but I'm good at synthesizing across. The reason why I felt better with this approach, I think I told you this, where we're hanging out at my forest. So I met this designer, sculptor, Igarashi Takanobu, in my late 20s, who helped me appreciate this idea of having a diverse set of backgrounds. He described it as when we get older, we're building a kind of like mound of skills. And he said there's two ways to do that. One way is to be very specialized. Another way is to be very broad. If you're very specialized, you build a very tall, narrow mountain that goes high up into the sky. If you do a very broad, you have a hill that's very shallow. But he says over time, decades, this hill becomes like a very stable mountain, just like Mount Fuji. That's a symbol of beauty in Japan. Whereas if you focus on one narrow skill your whole life, if something is wrong, it can fall over. I've always liked this image of mono-specialization versus multi-specialization. But that said, people who are single discipline specialists, I have a lot of respect for them.
What does it take from the point of view of learning styles to be a specialist versus a generalist?
I think that Stanford D School, the design thinking idea of the T-shaped person, broad, but also deep, in one discipline. I've always liked that metaphor, but the irony is that most universities and even high schools push you to be more specialized. What's your major? And the major is specialization. Universities don't create these kind of multidisciplinary people. On the other hand, when universities have a multidisciplinary program, the opposite happens, where you make one kind of basically stew, which is basically a discipline unto itself. So I think educational institutions probably cause this dilemma. Workplaces tend to say, are you a developer? Are you a designer? Are you a product person? Are you in marketing? Are you a people person? And the sorting hat, like in Harry Potter, makes you paralyzed in your career 1.0 frame of mind.
In your view, career 2.0, where you are monetizing a side gig, monetizing simply because it's proof of your proficiency, not for anything else, but it tells you that your work is good enough for somebody to find value in it. Is that, did you see it like a bridge?
Well, I really liked how you called out that in your principles in Career 3.0. If you're an agile thinker and you want to find another shift, you can either have a side gig or you can take a class. But it's a way to check whether you're able to diversify yourself further. And I like the idea of Career 3.0 because, as we know, if you invest in, your future, your financial future depends upon diversification. So I like this idea that people of the future, especially in the era of AI, when AI is changing worker, workplace, it's probably better to have a diverse portfolio.
I'm just amazed at the kind of places that you worked in. What a phenomenal career path. Either you worked in not-for-profits, you worked for like large corporations, small corporations, advertising, design, academics. My God, I mean, that's incredible, which is what makes you who you are.
Well, I did it in the wrong order, to be very clear. I did it in the wrong order. Most people someday become a professor. I started too early, and then I escaped from it to the corporate world. But I think people do it the opposite way. I would say never listen to me as an example. So
is that a better way to do it? That, be in the corporate world and then go to teach? Is that a good idea?
I think so. Yeah. Oh, well, but if you're teaching history or like the language of your country or whatever, things that don't change, I don't think you can find a job in the corporate world for that. But for things that change, I think corporate world is so much faster, especially the sciences.
When is art going to go mainstream in the corporate world?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because I have created an AI that asks me questions every day from things I said in the past. A question it always asks me is, when will art be adopted by the corporate world? My answer is always something like, I think that art is something from the cultural world, and the cultural world is an important world that generates a lot of good economics. And the business world is always connected to the cultural world, the art world. It may not just be direct. For artists to accept that as a really great way of working, art working in the business world is probably healthy, because the business world, as you well know, really cares about ROI. And art really has no ROI. Art has an ROI that is not monetary often. It's an expression of the human condition at a certain time, oftentimes makes other humans wonder. And wonderment is a wonderful thing. Like anyone who looks at your sketch notes, which are like pieces of art, or your interesting caricatures, they're a kind of art that makes you pause and think. I think it's in the category of, there's the Markatoons person, you know, that person. It's like, there's this like, oh, that's just a cool boil down. What is it, XCKD person, whatever. It's like, there's all these great people who are using art to communicate complex ideas, and they're affecting change. Will they be in the Metropolitan Museum of Art? Will they be in a museum? Well, they're in the Museum of the Internet, which has a pretty big impact.
In the older times, a lot of classical music, required patronage. And so whether it was a wealthy family or, in India, there were a lot of these princely states where they would sort of really say, go produce the art that you want, produce the music that you want, and your expenses are taken care of and all of that. Do you think that is a model in which art can function, whereas science functions better when you have like a conversion thinking that, okay, you produce this, you get paid? So the patent model.
I think whether it's Patreon or Kickstarter or Indiegogo on the one hand, or it's advertising supported content, people, I have so much respect for YouTube creators and TikTok creators. The way they're able to come up with ad revenue generating content, the consistency they have is unreal. So I think we have some of that patronage today. And those who are in Europe know very well that there's actual government funding for art. In United States is pretty rare.
Is that a good thing, to be hungry that, you don't know where your paycheck comes from, that produces you to have?
I learned one time from Paul Rand. So Paul Rand was a designer who is famous for the IBM logo, the UPS logo. In the United States, there's ABC Broadcasting. He did ABC. He did Westinghouse Corporation. People don't remember anymore, probably. He was a big deal. He's the one that launched me on this design path because I was in a library at MIT. I found this book, and because I was a computer science guy, and I was like, what is this book? What is it? It's about design. What is that? So I found this book, and it changed my career arc. And so I went to study design, etc. And then I met probably one of the most famous designers in Japan, Iko Tanaka. And I was heading back to the United States just to come back home. He introduced me to Paul Rand, this person I found in the book, because they were best friends. So I went to his house, and his house is in Connecticut. So, like you go to New York, you get a train, and this is in the 1990s. So there's no Uber or Lyft or whatever. So I get a cab. And the cab takes me out to the countryside. And I'm thinking like, oh, how am I gonna come back? But I had a meeting at 8 a.m. So I arrive at 8 a.m. The door opens, and this older gentleman looks at me and says, my assistant is sick today, and so you must stay the entire day with me and work for free. And I said, oh, okay. He's a very direct man. So I sat down at his computer, and I worked on the last pages of what was going to be his final book. From Lascaux to Brooklyn, the Lascaux Cave drawings to Brooklyn, where he grew up. And so around noon, I'm getting very hungry, and he comes out with a sandwich, luckily. And he says to me, I don't make sandwiches for anyone. So I'm very nervous, but I'm very hungry. So I'm eating the sandwich. And he's sitting right there across from me, looking at me while eating my sandwich. And he says, young man, I have something very important to tell you. I said, what's that? He said, make lots of money. And I said, what? Make lots of money? And he says, enough what you think. He said, he's learned in his 82 years as a famous designer, artist, whatever he was. He said, I've learned over the years that something that I love to do often doesn't make any money. Whereas something that I don't like to do, I can make money off of it. So he said, I make money off of things that I may not love to do to pay for things that I love to do the way I want them. He says, you found me in that book. what was the name of that book? I said, oh, it was like Thoughts on Design. Right. Do you remember how it was printed? And I said, yes, 5 colors. 4 color was silver, which, as you know, is very expensive back then. He said, I paid for the 4 colors because the publisher refused to print it beyond 1 color. And there he said, I had the freedom to do it the way I want to do because I could fund it with things that maybe I didn't want to do.
You follow that philosophy?
I did. I really became very aware that this mythical ikigai circle intersection of whatever, I've never been able to find. So I make money with things that, maybe I don't love to do all the time to fund things that I really love to do.
What do you love to do?
I love to create things and just think about them. I think that's the creative instinct. I like making things without an objective because I think I can find new things that way fastest.
One of the things I always debated about is that if you start to do what you really enjoy doing and you get paid for it, does it kill the creative profession, creative energy in you? Because I've seen, I've had the privilege of knowing some of the big cartoonists of India. When I look at their work, and they always used to have this time ticking there. They used to work for magazines and newspapers. They would say that it's like 3:30 and by 4 o'clock I have to submit today's cartoon and nothing comes to mind. And they're miserable, they're pacing, and somebody comes and says, okay, 15 minutes more, are you done? And the person says, yeah, I'm about done. And he's actually not done anything. And then he sort of, this cartoonist that I was talking about, he got up and said, never, ever become a cartoonist. Never, because this is what you go through every day. And then we step out for a cup of coffee, sits down and says, but it's so much fun when somebody holds a gun to your head and you can produce a cartoon. Imagine if somebody got hijacked and this happened. And he was laughing his guts off. And I thought, okay, which one is really you?
Pressure creates diamonds is a physical phenomenon, which I think is not a bad example of the creative act. I guess I'm saying that when you make things that have no objective, I think it feels like you're free to express yourself. And in that, you can find yourself faster. If you're trying to meet an objective that is basically to enable you to survive, to put food on the table for yourself and others, that's survival kicking in. I think if that's happening to you like every second of your life, I think you're not having the opportunity to reflect and invent. I will say that in my lifetime, I've had different balances of the ability to reflect a lot and then sort of be more pressured. I think right now it's like this, with the speed of AI. It's just phases, right? Different phases of your life. You've experienced it yourself, Abhijit. Sometimes this, sometimes this. If you have too much of one, you can't get it right. So we have to keep on going back and forth. Go home, go to work, go to art, go to technology. Focus on business. We focused on just like life, sinusoidal.
Yeah, and maybe one thought is that, in the book I talk about being on a perpetual S-curve, that as you start to build your skill, you become slightly better at something. As you feel you're at the peak of, you're the red tomato, as you said. And at that point of time, this is time to actually start throwing yourself into becoming a novice all over again in a different field altogether. And you straddle 3 of them. What's the next one?
Interesting. Well, that's kind of like I was describing the laws of simplicity. My favorite thing I found was a black belt in karate, the martial art, doesn't necessarily want to become more of a black belt. Their goal is to wear out that black belt so much after washing it and using it so it becomes a white belt. I always love that analogy.
I'm going to remember this one. That's how, you remain a novice and you retain the mindset of one.
Having become complacent in my own life too many times and rightfully knocked down when I become too complacent, I like the idea of that quote-unquote beginner's mindset. I think it's just healthy.
In your life, do you believe that you've grown because of circumstances, because of skills, because of people, because of opportunities?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I've grown each time. It's sort of like the harder you fall, the more you have to see if you can get up again. Again, if you have a certain level of privilege, you can do that. Someone without privilege, when they're down, they get knocked down, they go further and they can't come back. I also know age. I always thought about like one day I'm going to get down and not be able to get back up again. What keeps me going is asking myself, when will I not be able to get back up again? Let's just see.
And that's probably the tofu factory example that you just really value hard work. Is it true that design is more hard work or is more inspiration? How do you think about it?
I feel lucky that I know what hard work is. And it's not the work I do every day. Like hard work is like getting close to like losing a finger when you're washing this very industrial surface that your father or mother probably shouldn't let you sort of do as a child. All this like very in a manufacturing environment, which still many children across the world have to either experience because of their families or because of need for it to hold a job. That's hard work. I just feel blessed that I get to do really interesting work at different phases of my life. And I think thankfulness is the driver for me. When I can find the path to being thankful, everything lights up. Like I'm thankful to be here with you now. I'm healthy. Talk with you. So it's a wonderful feeling.
I've been fascinated by your YouTube show about John Maeda.
You're going to be on a Cozy AI Kitchen episode, going to go release soon.
You talk about this Cozy AI Kitchen. Talk to me about the format. How did you come up with that? It's just so fascinating. It is a show which talks about the most advanced concepts of AI. And it's simple enough for even somebody who knows nothing about this, like me, to be able to understand and appreciate. And yet it's got obviously like a children's TV show kind of a feel.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that?
Collaboration is the power, right? So there's Ross and Matt and his team and DevRel Studios had a few extra hours of green screen room availability. And I guess I've always loved the cooking metaphor for learning. And we quickly mocked up a kitchen and I wanted to feel more welcome. So Cozy AI was born then. Really, it depends upon the guest. I loved how when you were the first in-studio guest ever for Cozy AI Kitchen, and Abhijit's like an incredible actor. Just wait till you see him in motion. But when you put on the AI apron, you invented a new thing with me. I had never had a guest there, and we improvised. And so really improvisation is the key to the Cozy AI Kitchen. It's all not scripted or anything like that, which leads me back to Careers 3.0. Because I really think that when someone has a broad set of skills, they can improvise more easily. If they only have a narrow set of skills, they really can't improvise that well. And maybe in this new era where AI creates a little bit of how we feel to be imbalanced, the only way to rebalance ourselves is to improvise a way to getting back up or recentered.
You've written so many books. Do you have a favorite book of yours?
Oh my gosh, my favorite book is Self-Renewal by John W. Gardner. I think I shared the link with you, but if you just search with Bing, John W. Gardner, Self-Renewal, PBS. John Gardner was the HHS secretary under Lyndon B. Johnson. He created the public broadcasting system, PBS. And it's a short essay about how to live life as someone who leads change. And anyone who's had a bad day at work or at school or whatever, if you read it, it really kind of fills you up with energy. So Self-Renewal by John W. Gardner, pbs.org.
Before I end, I just want to say that, what are some of the places where people can read up about your work, your books, names of your books, your social handles? You've got that at John Maeda on Twitter and LinkedIn and everything, but where else can they find you and learn more about your thinking?
Oh, well, just being Cozy AI Kitchen. That's a new show. It's a pilot. It's a really pilot. It'll run maybe 6 episodes, and Abhijit's going to be in one of them. And I have tried to create a YouTube channel. I've always failed, but if you watch the things I have there, maybe I'll add more content to it and give me suggestions. And I'm on other platforms as well. If you're interested in AI, check out How to Speak Machine. It's a book I wrote, spent me 6 years to explain to anyone how AI works.
That's next on my reading list. Incredible, John. It's just really fascinating how this show, one of the things I've learned is some of the most fascinating and accomplished people are the ones who are the most curious, who really live the soul philosophy of just giving and reaching out. And, you've been one such role model for me, and it's something phenomenal. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with my listeners. And don't be surprised if your show now goes viral, your YouTube, and because people are going to sort of make you even more famous.
Thank you, Abhijit community.
Thanks once again. And if you have any suggestions with listeners, if you feel you want to be part of the show, or somebody who is interesting enough to be part of the show, then drop me a mail and I will talk to you. Till then, goodbye.